The first time my wife signed her name as CEO, she didn't look at the paper. She looked at me, like the ink was a blade, and she wanted to see if it cut. "Ethan," Brooke said, calm as a weather report, "your position is terminated, effective immediately." We were standing in the glass hallway outside her new corner office. It still smelled like fresh paint and ego. Her father's framed photos had already been taken down. In their place, minimalist art, a white orchid, and a bronze nameplate that read, "Oh, 4 days ago, Harold Hartley had passed away so suddenly the whole company moved like it was underwater. People spoke in whispers. People brought casseroles. People stared at Brooke like they were waiting for her to either crack or rise." She rose. And then she tried to bury me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at the envelope in her hand, the one with HR's letterhead, the one she hadn't even bothered to soften with a conversation at home. "You're firing me," I said. "I'm making a leadership decision," she replied. "That's the same thing when you do it like this." Her mouth tightened. Not guilt, annoyance, like I'd tracked mud onto her clean floor. "There's no need to be dramatic," she said. I almost laughed. Brooke had been born dramatic. She just wore it in expensive fabric. "What's the reason?" I asked. "You have to put a reason." She lifted a shoulder. "Restructuring. That's not a reason. That's a word you hide behind." Her eyes stayed steady. "I'm not debating this with you." "You're not debating because you don't have anything," I said. "I built half the operations playbook you're using. I recruited half the leadership team you're trying to impress. And you're doing this 4 days after your father—" Brooke raised her hand, palm out. A stop sign. "Don't," she said. "Don't use him." The air between us got thin. I could feel her assistant on the other side of the glass wall pretending not to listen while listening to every syllable. I lowered my voice anyway. "Then tell me the truth." Brooke's eyes flickered for half a second. Not sadness, not doubt. Calculation. "The truth is," she said quietly, "I don't want you here anymore." My throat went tight. "At the company." "At the company," she repeated. I watched her face like it was a safe with a combination I used to know. I'd married this woman. I'd slept next to her for 6 years. I'd seen her cry once, 2 winters ago, when she didn't get what she wanted fast enough. Now she stood in power like it was her natural climate. She held out the envelope. "Sign the receipt. Security will walk you to your desk." "Security," I repeated, tasting the word. "You're having security walk your husband out." "You're an employee," she said. "Not my husband, not here." Something moved in my chest. Not anger yet. Something colder. A memory. Harold Hartley's office, late night, 3 years ago. The smell of bourbon. The way he'd looked at me like he was trying to decide whether I was worth the trouble. And the words he'd said, low and careful. "If anything ever happens, if she ever forgets what this place is, you'll have a switch in your pocket." I hadn't thought about that in months. I hadn't needed to, because I'd believed we were a team. Brooke's eyes stayed on mine. "Sign it." I took the envelope. I didn't sign. Instead, I said, "Okay." That made her blink, just once, because Brooke expected pleading. She expected outrage. She expected a scene that would make her look calm and reasonable. I gave her nothing. I tucked the envelope under my arm like it was junk mail. "I'll pack my things." Brooke nodded, satisfied. "Good. Scott from HR will follow up with you about the severance offer." "Sure," I said. I turned to walk away. Behind me, Brooke's voice followed, soft and sharp. "And Ethan?" I stopped. "If you try anything," she said, "you'll regret it." I looked back at her. Her posture was perfect. Her face was steady, but her fingers were gripping the folder too tight. I smiled, small and polite. "I'm not the one who should be worried about regret," I said. Then I walked down the hallway while the company I helped keep alive watched me go. And I didn't look back once. Security didn't touch me. They didn't need to. The guard was a big guy with a tight haircut and nervous eyes, like he'd been told to keep it professional but didn't want to be part of a family war. He walked 3 steps behind me as I passed cubicles and conference rooms. People looked up. People looked away. Some gave me that sad little smile you give at funerals. No one spoke. I reached my office, technically my office, for another 5 minutes and opened the door. My desk was neat. A few framed photos. A small plant Brooke had bought me the year she was trying to be kind. I started with the photos. I turned them face down. Not because I hated the faces, because I couldn't stand the lie they represented. The guard shifted behind me. "You okay, sir?" "I'm fine," I said. I put everything into a box. Slow, careful, like I was packing evidence. When I was done, I looked around the room. It was just a room, glass walls, cheap carpet, a view of the parking lot. But I remembered the nights I'd stayed late here, fixing problems no one else wanted to touch. And I remembered the day Harold had called me into his office and closed the door. He'd poured 2 drinks. He'd pushed one toward me. I hadn't touched it. Harold had watched me a long moment, then said, "You love her." "Yes," I'd said. "Love makes people blind," he'd replied, "and power makes them worse." "Brooke isn't—" Harold had lifted a finger. "Listen." He'd opened a locked drawer and pulled out a thin folder. Not thick, not dramatic, just quiet. Inside were papers with seals and signatures, a structure, a plan. He'd slid it across the desk. "I set up a silent partnership when I bought out my brother," he'd said. "It's been sitting there for years. Most people don't even know it exists. Not the employees, not the board, not my daughter." I'd stared at him. "Why are you showing me this?" Harold's eyes had looked tired that night, like the weight of the company had finally seeped into his bones. "Because," he'd said, "she's my daughter, and she's capable, but she's also hungry, and hunger doesn't stop once you feed it." I'd swallowed. "Harold, are you asking me to?" "I'm asking you to protect the company," he'd said. "Protect the people, protect the legacy." "And Brooke?" Harold had held my gaze. "If she stays decent, she won't even notice. If she doesn't, you'll need leverage." He'd tapped the folder. 65%. I'd felt the room tilt. Harold had leaned forward. "Not in your name, not directly. It's held through a structure, clean, legal, quiet. If you ever need it, you'll know what to do." "And if I never need it?" Harold had almost smiled. "And then congratulations. You married the exception." I'd left that night shaken, angry, and strangely ashamed, like accepting a parachute meant I expected the plane to fail. I'd never told Brooke, because I'd believed we'd never need it. Now, standing in my emptied office, I realized Harold hadn't been paranoid. He'd been prepared. I carried my box out. The guard walked me to the elevator like I was a problem being removed. In the lobby, Scott Lyle from HR stepped forward with a polite, lifeless smile. "Ethan," he said, too loud, like volume could make this normal. "I'll email you the severance documents." "Don't," I said. Scott blinked. "Excuse me?" "Don't email," I repeated. "Send everything through counsel." Scott's smile stiffened. "Counsel?" I looked him in the eye. "Yeah, counsel." I walked out into the cold air, box in my arms, and for the first time since Brooke handed me that envelope, I felt something real rise up. Not rage, resolve. Because I finally understood what Brooke had done. She didn't just fire me, she tried to erase me. And the funny thing about erasing someone is, you have to be sure they don't own the paper. Our house was too clean when I got back. Brooke liked clean because clean looked controlled. Clean made it easier to pretend nothing messy existed. I set the box down on the kitchen island. Then I walked upstairs and opened the closet where we kept old tax files and holiday decorations and things Brooke never wanted to see unless it benefited her. I pulled down a black binder. Inside, copies of the silent partnership structure Harold had shown me, the ownership certificates, the trustee agreement, the voting rights, the conditions. Harold hadn't just given me leverage. He'd given me a map. My phone buzzed. A text from Brooke. "We need to talk tonight. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at the screen. Then I placed the phone face down like it was contaminated. I sat at the table and opened the binder. The documents were dense but clear. This wasn't a trick. It wasn't a fantasy. It was a business plan built by someone who knew how family could rot a company from the inside. 65% ownership, majority control, the ability to call an emergency board meeting under the bylaws if there was suspected misconduct or risk to the company. Misconduct. Risk. I thought of Brooke's eyes, the way she'd done it so fast. 4 days. I thought of the way the board had rushed to seat her, the way they'd wanted stability, and I thought of something else. The last 3 months. Brooke coming home late saying it was transition meetings. Brooke taking calls in the garage. Brooke showering right after late dinners like she wanted to rinse off the night. I told myself it was stress. I'd told myself it was grief. I'd told myself anything that kept my world intact. I stood up and walked into the garage. Her car was there. A newer model, black, spotless. Brooke liked shiny things. I opened the center console. At first I saw nothing but gum and receipts. Then, tucked into the side pocket, a second phone. Not a work phone. Not the company-issued device I knew about. A separate phone with a simple passcode screen. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I held it like it was a small animal. I could try random codes, her birthday, our anniversary, her father's birthday. But I didn't. Because I already knew something. Brooke wasn't careful because she felt guilty. Brooke was careful because she thought she was untouchable. I put the phone back exactly as I found it. Then I went inside, sat at the table again, and made 2 calls. The first was to Diane Mercer, a corporate attorney Harold trusted so much he once said, "If I ever stop breathing in the middle of a meeting, Diane will finish my sentence." Diane answered on the second ring. "Ethan, I need you," I said. There was a pause. "What happened?" "Brooke fired me." Another pause, heavier. 4 days. "Yeah." Diane exhaled slowly. "Okay, talk to me." "I have the binder," I said. Silence. Then Diane's voice dropped. "You have the binder?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "I'm looking at it." Diane didn't ask why. She didn't ask what I planned to do. Her job wasn't to judge my heart. It was to protect the legal structure. "Do not do anything impulsive," she said. "I'm not," I replied. And I meant it. Diane said, "I'll be at my office in 40 minutes. Bring everything." "I will." I ended the call. Then I made the second call. To Malcolm Reeve. He was Harold's trustee, the man who held the keys to the structure. He answered like he'd been expecting me for years. "Ethan Cole," Malcolm said. "I wondered when you'd call." "I didn't want to," I said. "No one ever wants to," he replied. "What happened?" "Brooke fired me." Malcolm didn't sound shocked. He sounded resigned. "Of course she did," he said. I felt my jaw tighten. "You knew she'd—" "I knew she might," he corrected. "Your father-in-law wasn't a romantic. He was a realist." I looked around my empty kitchen. "What do I do?" Malcolm's voice turned crisp. "You follow the documents, you follow the bylaws, and you do it clean." "Clean?" I repeated. "Yes," Malcolm said. "Because the moment you make it emotional, you give her an opening to paint you as unstable." I closed my eyes for a second. "I want to burn her." Malcolm didn't scold me. He didn't pretend he was above it. He just said, "Then do it with paper." I opened my eyes. "Monday," I said. "Emergency board meeting." "Monday," Malcolm agreed. "I'll notify the board in the proper form. Diane will guide you." I swallowed. "What if Brooke tries to block it?" "She can't," Malcolm said. "Not with the voting control where it is." A beat. Then Malcolm added, almost gently, "Ethan, you'll need to be ready for what you learn." My throat went tight again. "What do you mean?" Malcolm didn't answer directly. He just said, "Harold didn't build this structure for nothing." Then he hung up. I sat there in the silence and realized something that made my skin prickle. Brooke hadn't just changed after Harold passed away. She'd been becoming this for a while. Harold had seen it, and now, so did I. Brooke came home that night at 9:47. I knew because I watched the security camera feed on my phone. Not because I was spying, because I was done being surprised. She walked in like she owned the air. Her heels clicked on the tile like punctuation marks. I stayed at the table. She stopped in the doorway, seeing the binder open in front of me. Her face didn't change much, but her eyes did. "What is that?" she asked. "A problem," I said. Brooke's smile appeared, practiced and thin. "You've been going through my father's things." "I've been looking through mine," I corrected. Brooke stepped closer. "Ethan, you're upset. I understand that. But this isn't the way." "What is the way?" I asked. "You firing me like I'm a stranger?" Brooke's jaw tightened. "You were compromising the company." I stared at her. "How?" "You were too emotional," she said, and the word came out like a slap. "People were watching you. They were questioning leadership stability." I let out a quiet breath. "So your solution was to humiliate me publicly and remove me." "It wasn't personal," she said quickly. I nodded slowly. "Right." Brooke's eyes went to the binder again. "Close that." "No." Her voice sharpened. "Ethan, you have no idea what you're dealing with." I leaned back slightly. "Actually, I think I do." She stared at me, searching my face like she was looking for a crack. Then she softened her tone, her favorite trick. "Look," she said, "I can take care of you. We can talk about a generous arrangement. You'll be comfortable. You won't have to worry." I almost laughed again, not because it was funny, because it was insulting. You think this is about money, I said. Brooke shrugged. Isn't it? I looked at her. The woman I'd defended at family dinners, the woman I'd believed in when employees called her spoiled, the woman I'd loved despite her sharp edges. This is about you, I said, thinking you can do anything and people will just accept it. Brooke's eyes flashed. I'm doing what's necessary. Necessary for who? I asked. Brooke didn't answer. Instead, she said, I want you out of the house for a few days. My heart gave a small, stupid lurch. This is my house, too. Brooke's smile came back. Not for long, if you keep acting like this. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I stood up, closed the binder calmly, and carried it upstairs. Brooke followed me halfway up the stairs. Ethan, don't be childish. I stopped and turned. Childish is thinking you can fire your husband and then order him around like a staff member. Her expression hardened. You're not staff. Staff are loyal. That landed. Not because it was true, because it showed me exactly how she saw people. I nodded once. Good to know. I went into the guest room, locked the door, and sat on the bed with the binder on my lap. My phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. You should let this go. She's bigger than you. I stared at it. Then another message. Don't embarrass yourself Monday. My skin went cold. I didn't reply. I didn't rage text. I didn't threaten. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Diane. Then I typed one line back to the unknown number. Who is this? The reply came fast. Someone who knows what she's been doing. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Somewhere downstairs, Brooke's heels clicked again, moving across the house like she was pacing inside her own head. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Weekend. 2 days until Monday. 2 days until I walked into that boardroom. 2 days until Brooke learned what her father really thought about her leadership. And 2 days until I found out what she'd been doing behind my back. A Malcolm's voice echoed in my head. You'll need to be ready for what you learn. I closed my eyes. I'm ready, I whispered. But the truth? I wasn't. Not yet. Diane's office smelled like coffee and old books and decisions that cost people millions. She didn't waste time with comfort. She spread the documents out across her conference table and went through them like a surgeon. Okay, she said finally. This is valid. This is enforceable. This is extremely deliberate. I sat across from her, hands folded so tightly my knuckles hurt. Diane looked up. Did Brooke ever suspect? No, I said. Diane nodded. Good. Good? I repeated. It means she hasn't been preparing countermeasures, Diane replied. Harold did this correctly. Quiet, controlled, no loose ends. She slid one paper toward me. Under the bylaws, a holder of majority voting rights can call an emergency board meeting with proper notice. Malcolm will deliver it. That part is simple. And the part that isn't? I asked. Diane's gaze sharpened. The part where Brooke will try to turn this into a personal drama. It is personal, I said. Diane didn't smile. It's personal in your chest. But in that room, it must be business. If you sound like a wounded spouse, you lose credibility. I swallowed. So what do I do? Diane tapped the table lightly. You become the adult in the room. You become boring. You become undeniable. I let out a short, humorless breath. Boring doesn't sound like revenge. Diane leaned forward slightly. Boring is revenge when you do it right, because it means she can't shake you. She slid another sheet toward me. And you focus on governance violations. Fiduciary duty. Conflict of interest. Improper termination procedures. Threatening communications. I stared at the sheet. Threatening communications? Diane held my gaze. The texts you forwarded. I nodded slowly. Diane said, If Brooke has someone sending intimidation messages, that's not just childish. That's a serious governance issue. I hesitated. What if it's not her? Diane's eyes didn't soften. Ethan. Someone is protecting her. That's enough to raise questions. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a moment like answers might be written there. Then I said, I found a second phone in her car. Diane went still. Did you open it? No. Good, she said quickly. Do not. That creates problems. I nodded. Diane's voice lowered. But you should be prepared for the board meeting to expose more than ownership. I looked at her. She didn't say the word I didn't want to hear. She didn't have to. I left Diane's office with a plan and a folder and a strange calm that felt like stepping into a storm you'd already accepted. On Sunday night, Brooke didn't come home. She texted at 11:12, staying at my mother's. Need space? Don't contact me. I stared at the message for a long time, then placed my phone down. I didn't contact her. Instead, I opened my laptop and drafted the agenda for Monday. Not emotional, not dramatic, just facts and consequences. The boardroom had always been Harold's stage. Long walnut table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were being watched by the whole city. When I walked in, every conversation stopped. Brooke was already there at the head of the table, wearing a charcoal suit that made her look like she'd been cut out of a business magazine. She stared at me like I'd walked into the wrong courtroom. "Ethan," she said, voice tight. "You're not allowed—" "Actually," Diane said from beside me, calm as a blade. "He is." The board members looked from Diane to me like they were watching a magic trick. Grant Holloway, the board chair, cleared his throat. He was a former consultant with perfect hair and zero warmth. "This meeting was called by—" he began, then looked down at the notice in front of him. His eyes narrowed. "By Malcolm Reeve," he finished slowly. Brooke's posture shifted. "Malcolm doesn't—" The door opened. Malcolm Reeve walked in, older than I remembered, calm as gravity. He nodded once at the room, then placed a thick envelope on the table. "Good morning," Malcolm said. "This emergency meeting is valid under the bylaws. You all received notice. You all are here. Let's proceed." Brooke stood. "This is absurd. Malcolm, you have no authority." Malcolm looked at her like she was a student interrupting a lecture. "I do," he said. Brooke's cheeks flushed. "Based on what?" Malcolm opened the envelope and slid a document across the table, toward Grant. Grant read the first lines, then froze. His face changed the way faces change when the ground shifts under them. He looked up at me, then back down at the document like he was hoping it was a prank. "What is this?" Grant asked. Diane answered, crisp. "It's the controlling interest structure Harold Hartley established years ago. Majority voting rights, 65%. Brooke laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "No." Malcolm's voice stayed calm. "Yes." Brooke's gaze snapped to me. "You knew." I didn't flinch. "I didn't want to." Brooke's voice rose. "This is insane. My father would never—" "He did," Malcolm said. "He signed it. He structured it. He funded it. He instructed me to hold it." Brooke's hands clenched on the table. "Why would he do that?" Malcolm looked at her steadily. "Because he loved the company more than he loved your ego." The room went silent. Brooke's eyes burned. "And you?" she hissed at me. "You're using this to take what isn't yours." I leaned forward slightly. "No, Brooke. I'm using this to stop you from taking what isn't yours." Grant swallowed. "Okay," he said, voice strained. "If Ethan holds majority voting rights, what is the purpose of this meeting?" Diane slid the agenda forward. I spoke, slow and controlled. "The purpose is governance," I said. 4 days after Harold's passing, the new CEO terminated a senior executive without documented cause, without board consultation, and with security escort. That created legal exposure, that created operational risk, and that created reputational harm. Brooke cut in. He was unstable. He was emotional. I looked at her. I was loyal. Brooke's mouth tightened. Melinda Price, another board member, shifted in her chair. "This is a family issue," she said carefully. "No," Diane replied. "This is a fiduciary issue." Malcolm added, "And it's a control issue. The ownership structure exists for moments like this." Brooke's eyes flicked around the room, searching for allies. She found Vernon Shaw, a board member who'd been too friendly with her lately. Vernon avoided her gaze, suddenly fascinated by his pen. Brooke's voice sharpened. "So what? You're going to vote me out? In front of everyone?" I looked at her. "If you've been acting in the company's best interest, you won't have anything to worry about." Brooke's eyes flashed. "And if I haven't?" I didn't answer with emotion. I answered with truth. "Then you shouldn't be in that chair." Brooke leaned forward, voice low and venomous. "You're doing this because you can't handle being left behind." I met her gaze. "I'm doing this because you tried to erase me, and you thought no one could stop you." Grant cleared his throat again. "We need evidence," he said. "Not feelings." I nodded. "Agreed." I slid my phone onto the table. Screen up. "I received intimidation texts after being terminated," I said. I forwarded them to counsel. The language suggests inside knowledge. Brooke scoffed. "So now you're accusing me of—" I'm saying someone is trying to protect you, I replied, and it raises questions about what you're protecting. Brooke's jaw tightened. This is pathetic. Diane looked at Brooke. Then unlock your personal second phone. The room went still again. Brooke's eyes snapped to Diane. What? Diane's tone didn't change. Second device, in your vehicle. Not company issued, not disclosed. Brooke's face went pale, not with fear, but with anger that her secret was known. That's private, Brooke said. Grant frowned. Brooke, is there a second device related to company matters? Brooke's voice shook slightly. This is harassment. Malcolm spoke gently, almost sadly. Brooke, don't make this worse. Brooke stared at Malcolm like she wanted to set him on fire with her eyes. Then she turned to the board. Fine, she said. You want honesty? Here it is. Ethan has been undermining me. He's been trying to control me. He's been resentful for years because my father trusted me more. I let her speak. I let her climb higher. Because the higher Brooke climbed, the farther she'd fall. Grant said, We're not here for marriage grievances. Brooke snapped, Then why is he here? I answered calmly. Because Harold put me here. Brooke's laugh was thin. Harold isn't here. I didn't use the forbidden word. I didn't need to. I just said, No, he isn't. Then I slid one last document forward. A letter in Harold's handwriting. Malcolm nodded once. Read it, he told the board. Grant read silently. His eyes moved line by line. His face tightened. Then he looked up, voice rough. It says, The structure activates if Brooke demonstrates reckless leadership, personal conflicts that compromise judgment, or misuse of executive authority. Brooke's face twisted. That letter is... It's his handwriting, Malcolm said. Brooke's voice rose. He was manipulated. I met her eyes. By who? Brooke flinched like the question stung. Grant set the letter down. Brooke, he said slowly, we need to know if there are conflicts of interest. Brooke's lips parted, then closed. Melinda asked carefully, Are you involved with someone inside the company who could influence decisions? Brooke's eyes flicked, one quick glance, to Vernon Shaw. It was so fast most people missed it. I didn't, and Vernon didn't either. His face went tight. Brooke's voice came out sharp. No. Vernon cleared his throat. Brooke! Brooke snapped her head toward him. Don't. There it was. Not a confession, not a headline, but a crack. And cracks are all the board needs when money and liability are on the table. I leaned forward. Here's what I'm proposing, I said. A vote. Effective immediately. Remove Brooke Hartley as CEO pending investigation. Appoint an interim CEO. Reinstate my position temporarily for stability. And hire an outside firm to review executive decisions made since Harold's passing. Brooke stared at me like she couldn't believe I dared to say it out loud. Grant swallowed. That's extreme. It's governance, Diane replied. Brooke's voice turned icy. If you do this, Ethan, I will ruin you. I looked at her, truly looked. I know, I said quietly. That's why I'm doing it now. Grant glanced around the room. All right, he said, voice strained. We vote. Brooke stood, hands on the table, eyes blazing. You can't, Malcolm cut in, calm. They can, and they will. Grant lifted his pen. All in favor of temporary removal pending investigation? Hands rose. 1, 2, 3. Melinda. Grant. Another member. Vernon hesitated, then slowly raised his hand too, like he was saving his own skin. Brooke's mouth opened slightly. Her face didn't crumble. It hardened. Grant's voice was tight. Motion passes. Brooke stared at Vernon. You? She whispered. Vernon looked away. Brooke turned back to me. Her eyes were bright with something ugly and alive. This is not over, she said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smirk. I just said, For me, it is. Brooke took a step toward me, like she might forget where she was. Then Diane spoke, sharp and clean. Brooke, you are instructed to surrender company access and devices until the review is complete. Brooke laughed once, bitter. You think you've won. I looked at her and felt something settle into place, something final. I think you finally met consequences, I said. Brooke's breathing was quick. She glanced around the room again, searching for a way out. Then her gaze landed on me, and she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was the smile of someone who still believed they had one last card. You really want the truth? Brooke said softly. The room went still. My stomach tightened. Brooke Brooke leaned forward, voice low enough it felt like she was speaking directly into my ribs. "The reason I fired you," she said, "is because Harold didn't just set up that structure." I didn't blink. Brooke's smile widened. "He also set up a condition you haven't read yet." Diane's head snapped slightly, like a dog hearing a whistle. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. Grant frowned. "What condition?" Brooke looked at Malcolm. "Tell them." Malcolm didn't speak. Brooke looked at me, and her eyes were bright and cruel. "It requires," she said slowly, "that the person holding control proves they acted in the company's best interest, and not out of personal revenge." Diane's face went cold. Brooke's smile sharpened. "And guess what, Ethan?" She tapped the table lightly with one finger, like she was counting down. "The board gets to decide." My throat went tight, not because I was afraid of losing, because I realized Brooke was still trying to frame me as the unstable one, still trying to drag me into emotion, still trying to win by making me react. I took a slow breath. Then I did the one thing Brooke couldn't predict. I turned to Grant and said, "Then let's make this easy." I opened the binder Diane had brought and slid out one more document. A sealed envelope. Harold's handwriting again. I placed it on the table. "This is the only thing I haven't opened," I said, "because Harold told me not to unless it was time." Brooke's smile faltered for the first time. Malcolm stared at the envelope like he recognized it. Grant said quietly, "What is it?" I kept my voice steady. "It's Harold's final instruction," I said. "For the board. Not for me." Brooke's voice snapped. "That's not real." Malcolm finally spoke, calm and heavy. "It's real." Grant reached for the envelope, hesitated, then broke the seal. He unfolded the letter and began to read. His face changed as he read, like someone watching a door lock from the inside. When he finished, he didn't speak immediately. He just looked at Brooke with something close to disgust. Brooke's voice cracked, sharp with panic. "What does it say?" Grant's voice came out low. "It says," he read, "that Brooke is not to be trusted with unilateral control, that she will attempt to remove Ethan, that she will use intimidation if cornered, and that if she is removed, the board is instructed to appoint Ethan Cole as interim CEO for stabilization until a permanent leader is chosen." Brooke's mouth opened. No sound came out. Grant lifted his eyes to her. Harold predicted this. Melinda whispered almost to herself. He knew. Brooke's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Then her gaze found mine again, and her voice came out thin and furious. "You planned this." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't posture. I just said the truth. "No," I said. "Your father did." Brooke's face twisted. "He hated me." Malcolm's voice was quiet. "He loved you. He feared what you'd do." Brooke's breathing turned fast and ragged. "This is a betrayal." I nodded once. "Yes." Brooke stared at me like she wanted to claw through my skin. Then she whispered, "You're enjoying this." I held her gaze. "I'm not enjoying anything," I said. "I'm finishing what you started." Grant set the letter down, hands shaking slightly. "Brooke," he said, voice firm now, "you will leave the building. Company access is suspended. Counsel will contact you." Brooke didn't move. Then she turned to me, and the last mask slipped. "You think you're the hero," she said, voice low. "But you're just a man hiding behind paperwork." I stepped closer. Not threatening, just present. "In this world," I said quietly, "paperwork is power. And you taught me that." Brooke's eyes filled, not with sadness, but with rage she couldn't control anymore. She grabbed her bag, turned, and walked out. The door shut behind her. The room stayed silent for a long beat. Grant looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. He swallowed. "Ethan," he said, "are you prepared to step in?" I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. Then I looked at Harold's letter. Then I looked at the board, people who'd watched Brooke rise without questioning the speed, the timing, the cruelty. And I understood something sharp and simple. If I walked away now, Brooke would come back later, smarter, colder, and worse. So I nodded. "Yes," I said. Grant exhaled. "Then, welcome, interim CEO." I took the chair at the head of the table. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like responsibility with teeth. Diane leaned slightly toward me and murmured, "Stay clean." I nodded. I stared at the empty doorway Brooke had walked through, and inside my chest something settled, heavy, final, and calm. Because now she couldn't erase me. Now she couldn't rewrite the story. Now she'd have to live inside the consequences she created. I placed my hands flat on the table and said to the board, voice steady, "First agenda item, we stabilize operations. Second, we investigate executive conduct. Third," I paused, letting the silence lean in. "Third," I said, "we make sure this company never becomes a personal playground again." No one argued. No one interrupted. Outside the glass walls, the company kept moving, people working, phones ringing, printers humming, unaware that the power in the building had just shifted. I looked once more at Brooke's empty seat. Then I looked forward, and I began. Being interim CEO didn't feel like sitting on a throne. It felt like putting your hand on a stove to prove you could handle heat. The boardroom emptied in slow, stunned waves. People avoided eye contact like I might ask them why they'd been so eager to hand Brooke the keys without reading the fine print. Grant stayed behind with Diane and Malcolm. Grant rubbed his forehead. "We need to control the message," he said. "The employees, the vendors, the banks." Diane nodded. "We also need to lock access immediately. Brooke will try to pull files, email, contracts." Grant looked at me. "Can she do that?" "Not if we move first," I said. Malcolm's eyes stayed on me. "She will not accept this quietly." I didn't pretend otherwise. "Neither will I." Grant exhaled and said, "Okay, action items." Diane slid a notepad in front of me like she was handing me a weapon that didn't leave fingerprints. "First," she said, "you sign the interim authority letter. Second, IT disables Brooke's access and any admin tokens tied to her personal devices. Third, you do a company-wide message. Short, factual, no drama." I signed. My hand didn't shake, but my stomach did something strange, like part of me was still waiting for Brooke to walk back in and say, "Got you." It was all a test. She didn't. Instead, my phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. Wrong move. She's not alone. I stared at it, then showed Diane. Diane's jaw tightened. "Good," she said. "Good?" I repeated. "Good," she said again. "Now we can treat this as what it is. Interference. Keep every message. Screenshot everything. No replies." Grant glanced at Malcolm. "Do we call law enforcement?" Malcolm's expression didn't change. "Not yet. Not unless there's an immediate threat. We stay disciplined." Disciplined. That word followed me out of the boardroom like a shadow. I walked down the hallway toward my old office, the one security had walked me out of. Except now, people stepped out of the way like the floor belonged to me. It didn't. Not yet. I stopped outside IT. "Tom," I said to the head of IT, a tired man with gentle eyes and a permanent coffee stain on his sleeve. "We need to freeze Brooke's access immediately." Tom blinked hard. "She's the CEO." "Not anymore," I said. "Grant will confirm." Grant stepped forward behind me. "Do it." Tom swallowed. "Okay. Give me 5 minutes." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "And check for any unusual forwarding rules, admin escalations, vendor contract downloads in the last 10 days. Tom stared at me. 10 days? "I'm being cautious," I said. Tom nodded, and I saw the shift in his face, the moment an IT guy stops being confused and starts being scared. Because when the tech people get scared, it usually means someone did something very stupid. At 10:18 a.m., I sent the company-wide email Diane drafted. Short, clean, boring. Effective immediately, the board of directors has appointed Ethan Cole as interim CEO pending review. Operations continue as normal. Further updates will be shared through official channels, no insults, no family matters, no emotion. At 10:26 a.m., Brooke went loud, not through official channels, through gossip. My phone began lighting up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my name. By 10:40 a.m., a local business reporter emailed our general inbox. Confirm or deny. CEO Brooke Hartley removed after hostile takeover by husband. I stared at the subject line like it was a joke someone would tell in a bar. Diane didn't laugh. "She's shaping the story," Diane said, voice flat. "She wants husband revenge instead of governance failure." I looked out the glass wall at the office floor. People were working, but the rhythm had changed. Heads closer together, voices lower, phones held slightly tighter. "They'll believe her," I said. Diane's eyes stayed steady. "They'll believe the first clean version they hear consistently, so we give it to them." Grant walked in, pale. "Brooke called 3 board members. She's telling them you threatened her." I stared at him. "I haven't spoken to her since she left." "I know," Grant said quickly, "but she's saying you've been controlling for years." Diane's mouth tightened. Predictable. Then Tom from IT hurried into the doorway, looking like he'd seen something he wished he hadn't. "Ethan," he said, "we found something." My chest tightened. "What?" Tom glanced at Diane, then back to me. 2 weeks ago, a new vendor was added to our payment system. Approval was pushed through under Harold's old admin credential. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. Harold wouldn't have done that. Tom swallowed. That's not the worst part. The vendor address traces back to a shell office suite. No actual staff, no real operations. I felt my skin prickle. How much money? Tom shook his head slightly. Not huge yet, but scheduled payments are set to scale. It looks like a pipeline. Grant's voice turned sharp. Who approved it? Tom hesitated. The approvals point to Brooke's device signature. The room went very still. Diane exhaled, slow. That, she said quietly, is not a marriage problem. I looked at Grant. That's my proof. Grant swallowed. That's a scandal. I didn't blink. No, it's a lever. Malcolm's voice was low. She didn't just try to erase you. She tried to use the company like an ATM? Diane looked at me. Careful, she warned. Don't say it like revenge. I nodded once. I won't. But inside, something hardened. Because Brooke didn't just hurt me. She endangered everyone who worked here. And now, I didn't just want her out. I wanted her exposed. At 12:07 p.m., my assistant, no longer my assistant, but now assigned to interim leadership, knocked on my office door. Ethan, she said, voice tight. Brooke is downstairs. Diane looked up. In the building? Outside, my assistant said. At the main entrance. She says she wants to speak to you privately. Diane stood instantly. No. I rose anyway. Yes. Diane's stare was sharp enough to cut stone. Ethan, I'm not going alone, I said. You're coming. Malcolm too. Malcolm nodded once. Good. We walked downstairs together. Brooke stood by the glass doors like she belonged there. Coat perfect, hair perfect, face calm enough to be convincing, until you looked at her eyes. Her eyes were bright and hard. When she saw Diane and Malcolm with me, her jaw tightened. Of course, Brooke said. You brought an audience. Diane didn't react. This is appropriate. Brooke ignored her and looked at me. You think you've won. I kept my voice even. I think the board made a decision. Brooke laughed softly. No. You made the board make a decision. There's a difference. Malcolm stepped forward. Brooke, leave the property. Brooke's gaze snapped to him. You betrayed my father's trust. Malcolm's voice stayed calm. Your father asked me to protect the company. Brooke's eyes flashed. From me. From anyone, Malcolm said. Brooke turned back to me. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. I didn't flinch. I already regret trusting you. Her face twitched, just once. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice like she wanted this to feel intimate. You want to know why I really did it? She murmured. Why I fired you. I stared at her. You already gave me your speech. Brooke smiled, thin. That wasn't the real reason. Diane stepped closer to my side. Brooke, do not threaten. Brooke cut her off. I'm not threatening, I'm informing. Then she looked directly into my eyes and said, slow and clean, Harold told me about the structure. My stomach dropped half an inch. Not because I believed her, because I could feel she wanted me to doubt. He told you? I repeated. Brooke nodded. He told me he gave you a safety net in case I ever needed correction. Malcolm's brow tightened. That is not accurate. Brooke ignored him. And he told me something else, she said to me. He told me you would use it the moment your ego got bruised. I let a breath out through my nose. Nice story. Brooke's smile sharpened. You think it's a story because you still don't understand your father-in-law. She leaned closer. He didn't trust anyone, not even you. Diane's voice was sharp. That's enough. Brooke straightened, lifted her chin, and said loudly enough for the receptionist to hear, I'm going to court. Grant's words earlier echoed, She's telling people you threatened her. Brooke watched my face carefully, waiting for panic. I gave her none. Do what you need to do, I said. Brooke's eyes narrowed. I will. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She held it out like an offering. Last chance, she said softly. Sign a statement saying you initiated this out of personal resentment. Walk away, quietly, and I'll give you a generous settlement. I stared at the envelope. Then I looked at her. And if I don't? Brooke's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. They went colder. Then I'll make you into a monster, she said. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Brooke's expression flickered. Confused, irritated, because she expected a fight right here. Instead, I said something else. I have a question, I said. Brooke's eyes narrowed. What? I kept my voice casual, like we were discussing paint colors. What's the name of the vendor you added 2 weeks ago? For the first time, Brooke's composure cracked, just a hairline. Her pupils shifted. Her breath paused. Diane's head turned slightly toward Brooke, watching her like a hawk. Brooke recovered fast. I don't know what you're talking about. I nodded, like that answer was exactly what I expected. Okay, I said. Then the outside firm will figure it out. Brooke's mouth tightened. You're bluffing. I smiled slightly. No. Brooke stared at me for a long moment, then leaned in again, voice low. You don't have the stomach for this, she whispered. You want to be the good guy. That's why you'll lose. I held her gaze. Then I said the truth. I'm not trying to be the good guy, I said quietly. I'm trying to be the last guy you can't move. Brooke's face went flat. She turned and walked out the front doors into the cold daylight like she owned the world anyway. I watched her go. Then Diane exhaled. That was risky. It was necessary, I said. Malcolm nodded once. Now she knows you have substance. I didn't answer, because my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Check your inbox. Back upstairs, Tom from IT stood by my desk with his laptop open, eyes wide. Ethan, he said. Something just happened. What? I said. Tom turned the screen toward me. An email had been sent from Brooke's company account to a list of internal recipients. Leadership, finance, operations, just minutes ago. Subject line, Ethan Cole, personal conduct. My gut tightened. I opened it. The message was short, written like a formal accusation. It claimed I had harassed Brooke, threatened her, and attempted to seize control during a vulnerable time. It urged employees to document any inappropriate interactions. It was poison, and it was already spreading. Diane stepped in beside me, reading fast. Her face didn't change, but her voice dropped. She doesn't have access, she said. Tom shook his head. She shouldn't. Malcolm leaned in. But it came from her account. Tom swallowed. That means either an access hole or an insider. The room went silent. Then Grant's door opened, and he walked in like he already knew. Vernon Shaw just resigned, Grant said, voice tight. Effective immediately. He said it's for personal reasons. Diane's eyes hardened. Of course. I stared at Grant. Where is he? Left the building, Grant said. 5 minutes ago. My chest tightened. He's running. Diane nodded once. Because he knows we're going to look. Malcolm's voice was steady. You need to respond to the email. Diane pointed at me. Short. Facts. No emotion. I looked at the poison on the screen and felt that old instinct. Argue, explain, defend, rise up. Then I remembered Diane's word. Discipline. I turned to Tom. Can you trace the login? Tom nodded quickly. Working on it. I turned to Diane. Draft response. Diane already had her phone out. Already doing it. Grant swallowed. Employees are going to panic. I looked at him. Then we give them the truth fast. Diane handed me her phone 2 minutes later. I read her draft once. Then I hit send. Team. An unauthorized email was sent from Brooke Hartley's account. It has confirmed her access was suspended per board instruction. This incident is under investigation. Please do not respond to or forward that message. Operations continue as normal. Further updates will come through official channels. No anger, no humiliation, just the clean version. Tom spoke up. We found the access point. I looked at him. Who? Tom's voice went thin. Vernon Shaw's executive assistant used his credentials to generate a session token. It was done from inside the building. Grant's face went pale. So Vernon had help, Malcolm said. Diane's eyes locked on mine. This is your moment to end it. Cleanly. I nodded slowly. How? I asked. Diane's voice went sharp. We call the outside firm now, and we call an emergency board vote now. Not tomorrow, not later, now. Grant looked uneasy. That fast? I looked at him. If we wait, she keeps punching. Grant stared at me for a beat, then nodded. Okay. I felt something settle in my chest again, heavy, steady. Brooke wanted chaos, so I was going to give her structure, and structure was going to crush her. We reconvened the board at 2:30 p.m. Same table, same chairs, different energy. Now everyone understood this wasn't a romantic drama. This was a threat to the company. Tom presented the access trace. Diane presented the vendor pipeline. Malcolm presented the governance violations. And then I spoke, not as a husband, as interim CEO. Brooke used executive authority to terminate key personnel without documented cause, I said. Her account was used after access suspension to distribute an accusation email. A suspicious vendor pipeline was created, and a board member has resigned abruptly. Grant's voice was tight. What are you recommending? I looked around the table. I'm recommending permanent removal, I said. Immediate termination of her executive role, a formal referral to outside counsel for review, and a restraining order on company access through legal channels. Melinda swallowed. That's severe. I kept my voice calm. So is sabotage. The room went still. Grant looked at Diane. Is this defensible? Diane nodded once. Yes, and it's necessary. Grant glanced at the others. Vote. Hands rose, unanimous. Grant exhaled like the air had been sitting on his lungs all day. Motion passes. Brooke Hartley is removed permanently. No cheers, no victory speeches. Just a clean decision. Diane turned to me. Now you do one more thing. I looked at her. What? You stop her narrative, she said. You do a town hall, today, before she makes a bigger story. My stomach tightened. Grant looked alarmed. A town hall? Immediately? Diane didn't blink. Immediately. Employees are scared. Rumors are filling the gaps. You fill the gap. I nodded. Because fear spreads faster than truth. And Brooke knew that. So I walked out onto the floor and told my assistant to book the auditorium. Company-wide, I said. 15 minutes. My assistant stared at me like I'd lost my mind. I said it again. 15 minutes. The auditorium was packed. People stood against the walls. People held phones like lifelines. People looked at me like they were trying to decide if I was a savior or a problem. I stepped onto the stage with Diane off to the side and Tom near the back. No dramatic music, no spotlight, just a microphone and a room full of anxious faces. I took a breath. Then I spoke. I'm not going to waste your time, I said. Something serious happened today, and I'm going to tell you what you need to know, without gossip and without drama. The room went quiet. Brooke Hartley has been removed as CEO, I said. This decision was made by the board of directors, and I've been appointed interim CEO while an outside review takes place. Murmurs rippled. Quick. I raised a hand. I know you have questions. Here's what matters. Your jobs, your pay, and our operations are stable. No one is being punished for rumors. No one is being asked to take sides. I kept my voice steady, simple. There was an unauthorized email sent earlier from Brooke's account. I continued. IT has confirmed it was unauthorized. Please don't forward it. Please don't respond to it. That message is part of an investigation. You could feel the tension in the air, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for me to say something messy. I didn't. I said the line that mattered. This company is not a personal playground, I said. It belongs to the work we do together, and if anyone, me included, ever treats it like a toy, the system will correct that. A few heads nodded. People didn't clap. They weren't ready for that. But I saw something else. Relief. Because even if they didn't love me, they wanted stability. Then the doors at the back opened, and Brooke walked in. For a second, I thought my brain was lying to me. But it was her. Same coat, same perfect hair, different face. Her smile was bright and wrong. And behind her, 2 men in suits followed like they were her shadow. Legal. She stopped in the aisle and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. This is a lie, Brooke called out. He's manipulating you. The room froze. Every eye snapped to her. Diane stepped forward toward the stage edge, voice sharp. Brooke, you are trespassing on company property. Brooke lifted her chin. I'm the CEO. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I didn't posture. I just looked at her and said into the microphone, No, Brooke, you're not. Brooke's eyes flashed. And then she did what Brooke always did when she couldn't win quietly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She held it up like evidence. I have proof, she said, voice high and confident. Proof that Ethan planned this. Proof he used my father's condition to steal control. The room held its breath again, and I realized what she was trying to do. Make the employees fear me more than they feared her. Make me the villain. So I did the last thing she expected. I nodded toward Tom in the back. Tom raised his laptop slightly, and Diane spoke, loud enough for the room. Brooke, Diane said, before you read anything, you should know. The outside firm has already secured your device logs, vendor approvals, and email session tokens. Brooke's smile faltered. Just a flicker. Diane continued, voice crisp. We also have a trace showing the unauthorized email originated from inside the building using a token generated through Vernon Shaw's credentials. Brooke went still. People around her turned their heads, like the name hit them. Then I spoke into the microphone, calm as stone. Brooke, I said, if you have a statement, you can submit it through counsel. Right now, you need to leave. Brooke's eyes snapped to the crowd. She tried to recover. You're letting him do this? She shouted at them. You're letting him take your company? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I said the sentence that ended her performance. This isn't your company, I said. It never was. Brooke's face tightened like she'd been slapped, and then Malcolm's voice carried from the side aisle. He'd come in quietly, like he always did. It belongs to the people who keep it honest, Malcolm said, and you failed that. Brooke looked around, searching for someone to rescue her. No one moved, because the room wasn't buying her anymore. Brooke's hands clenched around the folder. Then she did something that made the whole auditorium inhale at once. She opened it, and she tried to read, but her voice caught, because the first page wasn't what she expected. Her face changed. Not anger, not pride, shock. I knew why before anyone else did, because I'd seen that handwriting, Harold's handwriting. Brooke stared down at the page like it was a mirror showing her something she couldn't stand. Her lips moved silently, reading. Then, without meaning to, she read one line out loud, just a fragment. If she tries to turn them against him... The room went so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. Brooke's hands started shaking. Diane stepped forward. That's enough, Brooke. Brooke looked up at me, eyes wide now, voice thin. You... she started. I stepped closer to the microphone and my voice stayed steady. I didn't write that, I said. Your father did. Brooke's face collapsed into something raw and ugly. For the first time all day, her mask truly broke in front of everyone, and I didn't twist the knife with insults. I didn't humiliate her with jokes. I just ended it clean. Security, I said into the mic, calm and final. Escort Brooke Hartley off the property. 2 security officers moved in. Brooke looked at the crowd one last time like she expected someone, anyone, to speak up for her. No one did. As she was guided toward the doors, she turned her head toward me and hissed, low and shaking. You think this is over. I looked at her and felt nothing dramatic. Just truth. It is, I said. Brooke disappeared through the doors. The room stayed silent for a long beat. Then I said, into that silence, we get back to work, together. No applause. But something better happened. People started breathing again. And in that moment, I understood what real revenge looks like. It isn't screaming, it isn't chaos. It's taking the stage away from someone who lived for it. It's making them small in the one place they thought they were untouchable. I stepped back from the microphone, looked at Diane, and nodded once. Diane nodded back, approval without warmth. And I walked off the stage knowing Brooke would never control this company again. Not with threats, not with stories, not with charm. Because the truth had finally caught her in public. And it didn't let go.